Welcome to 1,000,001 Things.
Girls, get it together. You have a show to do.
Because it's cool to know stuff. Let's get started.
Welcome to our show, 1,000,001 Things, because it's cool to know stuff. We're sponsored by Quirky Minds Media, your full-service media production company. If you want to know how we can help you at Quirky Minds Media, go to quirkymindsmedia.com for more information. My name is Temple Kinyon, and I am joining you, Cynthia DeBoer, my lovely co-host, remotely from my mom and dad's house in North Idaho.
I know.
Hi,
it's so exciting.
It is. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I've had kind of a crazy week, as always. You know, Quirky Minds Media is always something going on. So we've had a good week. How about you? Did you get to ride the combine?
No, that comes later. We can do another remote later.
Well, I want to come up there and ride it. That's one thing I haven't done yet. It's on my bucket list, for heaven's sakes.
That'd be fun. We could totally do a show and annoy my brother on the combine.
Oh, yeah. Well, annoying brothers are always a good thing.
Well, these are my parents, Joe and Pam Anderson. Thank you for being on the show. I kind of coerced them, so I want to thank you for taking time to be on the show. Welcome.
Welcome.
You guys can talk. Thank you. I didn't prep them too much because, you know, we don't want it to sound too scripty. So,
well, exactly.
My mom and dad live on a farm in North Idaho, and they, along with my brother Cody and his wife Chris, farm things like wheat, peas, lentils, rapeseed, canola. My brother has garbanzo beans, you know, if you like that hummus stuff.
Right.
So they basically are living in the breadbasket of the world and feed the world. So I thought it'd be kind of cool to just kind of pick their brain and let our listeners hear what it's like to live on a farm and be farming. They both came obviously from backgrounds of farming. My dad started farming his family's land in the 60s. But of course,
67.
He did it, you know, when he was a kid too. And my mom's family also farmed not too far away from here. So they both had that background. But why don't you tell us how you guys met?
We met when we were in grade school, actually. Mom, even though she was living in Idaho, at that time, the students in her area were being bused to Palouse, Washington. And when we were in the 6th grade, I think it is, the decision was made, rather than Idaho school district pay tuition to a Washington school district, they would bring those kids to Potlatch. And so that's how we actually met when Mom was transferred from Palouse to Potlatch. And we went through various times together, I guess, being boyfriend and girlfriend maybe as early as the 7th grade, and then going our separate ways a time or two. And eventually when we got in high school, we kind of got together permanently.
And today, as we're recording, just ironically, it is their wedding anniversary.
Wow. How many years?
58.
Yay!
Hey, Mom and Dad!
That's
Woo-hoo!
for sure. That's awesome.
Well, but you got to realize we were married when we were 12.
Yeah. Well, you know, you can tell that just by looking, honestly. What about some tips for being married so long? Because, you know, I know people that say, well, I walked up the aisle and if it doesn't work, I'll just call it quits. And unfortunately, we see that a lot. People don't have a whole lot of staying power like you two.
Well, I don't know. We kind of just went through every day at a time, and it ended up to be 58. We're stuck together now. We're not going to separate now. It's been too long.
Too much time and money invested in each other.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know that we have any silver bullets, actually. I think a lot of it has to do with the way we were brought up. Our parents were married for their lives. Our grandparents were married for their lives for the most part. That was just tradition. That's what you did.
Exactly. I know I joked around with my husband because unfortunately we both went through a previous divorce before we got together. I told him, I said, I'm not going through another divorce. So there's only one way out of this marriage and you can choose if it's natural or not. Because that's horrible.
That's good. Chad always tells me, my husband always tells me, you're bought and paid for now, so I'll just keep you around. It'd be too expensive to replace you.
Exactly.
Well, that's the point, because we got a lot of debt. And if we were to go separate ways, there might be more debt than there would be assets to distribute.
Yeah.
So we better just stay together and keep it together.
Yeah. That comes with farming. Definitely. So about the farming, maybe let's talk a little bit about that so our listeners can get a little bit of an idea. So what, in your opinion, and you both can answer, is like one of the most important things about your farming?
Well, we enjoy the lifestyle. And actually, the choice to farm was a lifestyle choice. We both of us grew up on a farm, and it seemed like it just sort of seemed like the thing we were going to do. We both have education beyond high school that would have allowed us to do a lot of different things. But we made that lifestyle choice. If we looked at it strictly from the standpoint of the economics, we'd made the wrong choice. But if you look at it overall, I think we both believe we made the right one. Did we?
Yes. Well, it's something that, for the most part, we can do together. However, I sort of retired here, I think, about 4 years ago. And now I'm just on call. So, but up until then, we did a lot of stuff together. I drove truck and helped haul hay and helped overhaul equipment when they needed somebody to hold something or do something. So it's pretty much been a lifetime of doing things together.
I think that's really important. My family on my mom's side, her grandparents, they lived in Arnold, Missouri, which is just outside of St. Louis, 17 miles. And they farmed everything you can imagine, from potatoes, tons and tons of strawberries, all kinds of berries, tomatoes, you name it. And they had a little roadside stand, and they would even take a lot of produce into St. Louis to sell it. And they loved it. And it was always, you see the Rockford or the Rockford pictures, and that was my grandmother. I mean, she was out there in her cotton dress with her hat on, her little gloves, picking strawberries and doing all of this. And she was just quite the lady. And Grandpa, too, he was something else. He would always come in about noon, and he'd take off his big old bib overalls, and he'd lay down for 15 minutes holding a watch in his hand. And when the watch hit the ground, then he knew it was time to get up, and then he would go on with his day. And it was a lot of fun, and I loved it. I loved going out there and picking strawberries and doing all that fun stuff. It was great. So I can totally appreciate your love of that.
Yeah, it was great growing up on a farm. Usually in the spring, that's when a lot of the work starts, although even the previous fall, there's some seeding that is done, and then it winters over. And when I was a kid, we hayed a lot and had a hay crew. And Mom would fix a big meal for them at noon, and then they'd fall asleep under the tree out in the yard for a little while, digesting. And then there was always a little break in there where we kind of could go swimming at the lake. It was the wait time for everything to ripen up. And then in the late summer, early fall, that's when all the big show came. Back then, my parents farmed about 1,400 acres. And raised myself and my sister Tracy and my brother Cody. So I want to know just exactly how you guys handled all of that, if you want to share anything, because we are amazing children. So how did you do it? There were probably some times you wanted to strangle us, I'm sure.
Well, in the early years, my dad and I farmed together. We had a partnership and then later on a corporation. My parents only lived 3 miles away, and Mom's parents only lived 6 miles away, maybe.
Something like that.
And so we had a way to deposit the kids elsewhere at times and if we needed to. And of course, grandparents were always eager to have grandkids, even if they didn't really want them. They would take their chances.
They always wanted us.
And then later on, we had a full-time employee. Having an employee on a farm is difficult because it's hard to match up the size of the operation. You can't hire a half a person.
Yeah.
So then we kept him. He actually worked for us, I guess, for 26 years.
Wow.
And Cody decided that farming maybe was going to be for him. And I think, again, it was a lifestyle choice, not an economic one. So our employee decided that maybe the time had come for him to actually find a job where he had a retirement and benefits and some of that sort of thing, because that wasn't being provided on the farm. Our operation has grown to something over 3,000 acres, and Mom and I are in the process of trying to transition, which isn't easy. You can't just dump it all on the kid the next day, and so it'll take some time, and I'm glad it is taking time, frankly.
Yeah.
I don't have a favorite rocking chair that I want to be in all day long.
No.
Yeah, well,
Maybe a few minutes in the afternoon till he drops the watch. Is that how that works, Cynthia?
yeah, that's how that works. And I grew up a carpenter's daughter, so I started going out with my dad in the field when I was like 12 years old, and I absolutely loved it. And I loved spending time with my dad. He was one of these teachers that this is the way I do it, but if there's an easier, better way for you to do it, then you go for it. And of course, you know, he was also kind of tough. You're around saw blades and everything, and if you cut your finger or whatever, it was like, well, did you cut it off? Nope. Okay, well, wrap it with some duct tape and keep on going. And that's what we would do. But I loved it. And I think that when you mentioned the kids actually being dropped off at the grandparents', there's a book that I absolutely love, and it's about Aboriginal people. And what they say is that it's really good to have grandparents really spend time with the kids, because they learn as much as the kids learn from them. And it's really a nice treat to be able to keep those memories alive of things, watching the weather and watching how crops grow and all of those kinds of things. It's all of that is so important, and I really feel we're losing that. And so I applaud you guys for keeping that alive.
It was fun. Harvest was a big deal. Maybe even ahead of Christmas. And Mom always had things for us to do when we were riding in the grain truck. She would drive grain truck, and Dad would, at that time, drove the combine. Now Cody has obviously taken that over. But she would make sure we had color books. And, you know, we were told the rules. If you run around out, you had to wear tennis shoes. And if you wore shorts and you ran out in the stubble field, you risked cutting your legs up on that stubble, but we did it because we thought it was fun. I mean, did we drive you nuts? I'm sure we did.
Maybe just a little. When the color pens melted, they argued over them.
Oh.
And our son thought it was really, really great to do his little pee out on the truck tire. That was what he did it for.
He was experiencing his inner dog or something, I guess.
The great outdoors. Yeah, it was a great childhood. I mean, I thought it was hard work, and I saw my parents get up before the crack of dawn and work all day into the night. I mean, dinners were sometimes at 8 or 9 or later at night. And I think, you know, I look at my work ethic and my parents' work ethic, and I'm like, boy, I don't know if I could have done it. I just think it's a great lifestyle. It's different. People talk about farm to table with their food. And I don't know if some of those people understand the blood, sweat, and tears literally that goes into feeding America and feeding the world. And I just think it's important that we emphasize how important farming is. So what do you guys think is something that maybe not everyone might know? Like, is there a little something they're like, I bet nobody knows that when you farm?
Well, I think it became obvious, or should have become obvious, when the pandemic hit, that there was product in the fields that were being destroyed. And of course, the media made more out of that than actually happened. But there was some of that, milk being dumped and that sort of thing, pigs being killed. And yet people were not able to have, the grocery store shelves were beginning to be empty. And I guess people didn't really realize what the system is in between the farm and the grocery store shelf. You know, a dairy right now does not squirt the milk from the cow into those little plastic bottles. It goes into refrigerated tanker trucks and is sent to a processing plant.
Yeah.
Idaho is the third biggest dairy state in the nation now, and those dairies are, you know, up to 30,000 cows that are being milked 2 to 3 times a day. You don't have the infrastructure to be able to deliver that milk directly to a consumer. And so I think a lot of people maybe became very disturbed about that, but maybe in the process there was a little bit of a learning curve that we take our food supply for granted to a great extent.
Yeah. What do you think, Mom?
I have to agree. The big thing in Idaho now is to take out 4 dams on what we call the Snake River, and they've put them in, and we have barge or freight shipping on ship clear to Portland because of those dams. And wheat is a big deal on it. We ship a lot of wheat, and it keeps some of the trucks off the road and stuff, and they want to take them out. So it would really, really hurt wheat shipping or farm shipping on these big barges that come into Portland. And Joe and I have been lucky enough to visit the port at Portland, and it's amazing how big those ships are and what they bring. I think that day must have been unloading some steel or something, but they had cranes there and were moving. It's just amazing. And it would really hurt the farming industry because we are able to ship so much of our product on those ships.
10% of the nation's wheat supply goes down that stretch of the Snake River on its way to export terminals, which then is shipped, all over the world.
Wow, that's impressive.
10%.
Yeah, 10%. And it's done in a way that a barge tow, I probably get the numbers wrong, but I think that it amounts to 133 rail cars.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that because, obviously,
down
trains
the
are...
river, the current of the river helps with the propulsion of the barges. And so the fuel consumption on a per bushel basis is much, much, much less than it would be shipping by rail or truck.
Oh, well, that makes sense.
And the dams provide, just as a little aside, hydroelectric power, which my mom is involved in the power co-op in this area. There's co-ops all across the nation. Not all electricity is provided by co-ops, but there are co-ops, right?
Right.
And so you served on a board of directors for Clearwater Power.
Yes.
For how many years? 26 years.
Wow.
She knows how important the dams are, obviously for the farming industry, but also for the hydroelectric power.
Yeah. It's good energy because it doesn't destroy anything. It takes the water, and they can control the water at the dams. So if it gets a little slack, or if we're going through a period of a lot of water, they can let a little water out. The biggest mover is the Indian tribes, and they say that it takes away their salmon. So it's just kind of a big back and forth right now. But I don't know. I think I'm kind of coming to believe that maybe sometime they might come out, and it will be just a devastation to the rural areas that ship that way. But we have to kind of please everybody.
Times change, I guess. So what other things have you been involved with outside of the farm? Mom's done the co-op and spent a lot of, if we need to do a show on electricity, she's the one.
I know.
Hey, well, we are always looking for shows, so
yes, we might need to have her
definitely...
back.
Exactly.
And other than, she raised kids and helped farm and all that kind of stuff, but she also was sort of the person that held things together when Dad did other things away from the farm, which he's had a lifetime of service. What are some of the things that you've done?
Well, I've served on various agricultural organizations, boards of directors, and a couple of different commodity commissions, and a couple of different appointments from the federal government appointments for one for science and education and farm service agency committee person for the state of Idaho. I guess it's nice to say, that the driving force is to give something back, but I've always felt probably I got more than I gave in terms of maybe understanding issues and opportunities to meet people and establish lifelong friendships. Even though you serve on a board of directors and that tour ends and you never see that person again, it's still a friend.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's probably really one of the biggest takeaways from that sort of a thing is the people you meet and the associations you build.
And just as an aside, we are working on the memoir for Dad, and it includes Mom too. So those stories will be told soon, we hope.
You'll get it done. Everything in its own time, as they say. And it's important to really take your time and make sure that it's right, because you wouldn't be happy otherwise, because you're a big perfectionist, as I am. So you got to be right. When it comes to the crops and stuff, and you mentioned that there was a lot of different ones. Do you have to rotate fields because of minerals and that kind of thing, or how is all that handled?
Yeah, crop rotations are, at least in our business, they're an essential part of the operation. And winter wheat is the crop that we have the best chance of actually making any money on. And most everything we do is to try to raise a better winter wheat crop. Crop rotations by having different species and different growing seasons tends to help with control of insects and diseases and weeds. I have had experience raising crops too close together and wondering why the yields weren't what I thought they should be, and then expanding that rotation. And actually, we went from a 2-year rotation where it was a wheat and basically peas, lentils every other year to a 3-year rotation that included a spring grain crop in there. And we grew, on a third of the acres, we grew about as many bushels of winter wheat as we did with half.
Wow. So it does make a big difference then. Yeah.
But of course, the issue becomes, can you make any money on those other 2 crops? And the answer to that is sometimes.
I just tell them, we live in Vegas, Cynthia, and we obviously are very well aware of the gambling situation. There's winners and losers, and I always tell my parents farming is probably the biggest gamble because you're at the mercy of Mother Nature and everything that comes with that. And it can be really good and it can be a little shaky sometimes, because it's unpredictable to a point. The weatherman does a good job, but by the same token, you just never know.
Yeah, that's true.
I think it's down to a science pretty well, but there's a lot of variables that play into having a good crop every year. So,
well, like you said, too, the pandemic affects it because, like I said, with me doing carpentry work, I can't even tell you because of the pandemic, and I'm sure there's other things that go on with that. The cost of a 2x4, a crappy 2x4, has tripled. It's been insane. Everything that we go to do, you used to be able to get a fairly decent 4x8 sheet of plywood for $30. Well, that's long gone. It's doubled. So it does affect everything. And I know that there's the Farmer's Almanac. Do you guys, is that kind of a Bible that you use, or is that more hype than not?
Actually, no, it's not. I don't have much faith, frankly. In the area we live, the Palouse country of the inland Pacific Northwest, if you try to predict the weather, you probably are going to end up being wrong more often than long-range weather forecasts may give some sort of guidance to weather patterns as a whole across the nation, but as an individual farmer, they don't really mean very much. You look outside and that's what the weather is.
Yeah, it's the swinging rock thing, if you have a rock hung by a string and it's swinging, it's windy. If it's wet, it's raining. If it's white, it's snowed, and all those kinds of things. And if it's gone, you better take shelter.
Right.
Well, it's a beautiful sunny day today. It froze last night, but it's a beautiful sunny day today. On the day that Pam and I got married, when we got up in the morning, it was pouring down rain, and it rained all day long.
Well, see, that's another good sign. According to my daughter and her book about marriages, that if it rains on your wedding day, you're going to have a long, happy, healthy relationship. So there you go.
Our father's very happy.
But I bet you kept your white dress clean somehow.
I did.
There you go. Well, I got married at Hemingway Park, which is right by Lake Mead. And the night before, I was outside with my stepson, and we were filling water balloons in the rain. And then the next day, it only got into the 70s, and we called it the picnic in the park. We had 3-legged races, watermelon seed spitting contest, and a water balloon toss that was supposed to be a toss that ended up with me and my husband, the best man, the maid of honor, everybody drenched. And thank heavens I was just wearing a linen dress because it would have been a disaster otherwise. But it was a lot of fun, and you got to enjoy those days. And that just makes it something special to remember.
Yeah. I don't know how we're doing on time, but just something that maybe you guys want to leave the listeners with. What are things that maybe you guys face or see farmers facing now and maybe, into the future? Not that you can predict the future, but just do you see issues that might play into farming in the future, and maybe some advice for people who are just trying to get into farming or they're young and haven't done it for a couple of years like you guys have?
Well, one of the things that I see for me currently is one of the most bothersome things, and what I see as causing a backdrop of things that are going to be very difficult for not only farmers, but anybody that's in business. And we've gotten ourselves polarized in the political situation to the point where, first of all, we can't agree on can't even compromise on some of the most important issues. And so many of the issues that face us every day in terms of environment and health and all of those sorts of things are going undone. The other thing is, if you're in a business, you have to be able to plan. And if you go from one extreme to the other as a result of an election every 2 years, it makes it extremely difficult to do any long-term planning for any kind of a business. And that has gotten to the point where I think it's going to be, if we don't get it figured out, it's going to be damaging to not only agriculture, but, anybody that eats, but also to many, many other businesses. And I've spent quite a lot of my time on behalf of various agricultural groups in lobbying. And what I've found is that if you're not willing to compromise, you're not going to get it done, realizing that generally compromise is going to end up costing more money. And so if you have one side wants to spend a lot of money and the other side doesn't want to spend any, compromises maybe spend half as much. And if neither side's willing to give on that, we're just not going to get the jobs done.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it is so true. I mean, if an idea is a good idea, then maybe, you can work together to figure out, like you said, a good compromise so that both sides don't feel completely cheated and they feel like they've won a little bit. I mean, that's really what the whole benefit of compromising is. And I'm sure in the 58 years of marriage, you two have compromised with each other too. I mean, we do that all the time in every area of our lives. And when we're talking about food production and other businesses, it's just as, if not more important to do that.
Yeah, you would think food production wouldn't be politically charged, but it is. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But the major decisions that need to be made have to still be made for us to be able to continue with the processes of getting food to people. So that is interesting. And of course, the dams you brought up is going to be an interesting situation for this area too, how that plays out.
It is. It's going to play a big part in it. It really, really is. And it's going to cost the taxpayers a horrendous amount of money to do this. And then we will lose, of course, our environmentally good source of power. I don't think that there would be enough solar and wind power to serve the Pacific Northwest and more. So I don't know how that's going to come out.
Just got to pray a lot.
Yeah, right. I do go around with my fingers crossed once in a while.
Yeah, exactly. Fingers, toes, legs, knees, whatever you can do. And knocking on wood doesn't hurt either.
There's 4 dams on the lower Snake River that serve to even out power supply so that the region doesn't end up in a situation like Texas had, where if one thing goes down, the whole system goes down.
Yeah, that was frightening.
And even though those dams don't produce a huge percentage of the total electricity generated, you can store water. You can't store wind, and you can't store light yet. And so it provides a mechanism to even the supply out in relation to the dam. And so far, there aren't many other ways to do that other than through hydro or through fuel-fired turbines of one kind or another.
That's interesting. Yeah, I don't think people understand that either. I mean, we have obviously production of electricity here at the Hoover Dam, and a lot of people just take it for granted. And I mean, I know when we lived in Colorado it was always so cold, and we lost electricity a lot. There were a lot of outages, and we always had a gas stove because at least we could all stay warm around the stove. We just block off the house and all sleep in the dining room or whatever. But again, it's like anything else. It's even taking care of our bodies. We need food, nutrition, doctors at some points. We need chiropractors at some points. Well, it's the same thing with our energy. We need to have several sources so that we're never without.
Yes. I think we all agree on that in this little conversation today, that it takes every source so that we can maintain our businesses, our production, and our way of life. You know, you can deal with a power outage for a little while, but when we have them in the summertime in Vegas, who doesn't worry about whether your refrigerator is going to keep your stuff cold when it's 120 degrees outside and your house is getting close to 90 degrees inside because you don't have the air conditioning? Hydroelectric power is key where we're from and here too. So think about it that way. That's a nice little connection.
Yes,
well,
exactly.
Any activity, there are always trade-offs. And there, unfortunately, the trade-off that has been made is that the cost of maintaining salmon runs has increased exponentially, and that falls basically on the backs of the ratepayers in the electric cooperative system. And the idea that we can breach the 4 dams and have things go back to the way they were in 1895 probably is not realistic.
Well, there's one thing in life that's constant, and that is change, and people need to try to adjust to that and try to make the best decisions for the population and the needs at the time that they're in. And going backwards, I mean, I love looking at the old Westerns and all of that, but I sure as heck wouldn't want to live back in that time. I love indoor plumbing. So, I would not want to go back to that. So I think people need to really think about that a little bit more.
Well, should we wrap her up? Are we up against time?
Yeah, we're doing really good. We're over a bit, but that's okay. I
just want to say thanks to my parents for their time. It's a crazy time of year. As people who farm know, that springtime is when you get ready for a lot of stuff to happen. So I want to say thanks for the time. And Cynthia, you realize this is our second remote, and I think we've been successful. I guess we'll find out after the fact. But now we get to do remotes all over the place in Las Vegas. So we're going to be running all over.
Oh, I know. We've actually got a few places in mind that we can go visit. And I thought, even a tour of Quirky Minds Media might be a fun one to do.
Okay.
Yay. Because we've added a bunch of stuff. So it's going to be cool. And it's been really, really an exciting time. And could not ask for a better co-host. So I guess we're going to sign off. And thank you both for joining us. Y'all have been listening to A Million and One Things. Check us out at amilliononethings.com or email us if you have any questions for these lovely Idahoans at amillionandonethingsshow@gmail.com. Email us and let us know if you have any questions, maybe some show ideas, whatever you would like to do. Let us know what you think. And as we say, a million and one things.
Because
it's cool
to know stuff.
Yoo-hoo!
Like a delay.
Yes.
You know what? If we can't laugh at us,
we're dead in the water if we can't. So bye for now. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.
Well, thanks, Cynthia. We appreciate you taking time to do this remote.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Join us next time when we come up with something new.
After all, there's always a million and one things to talk about.
Girls,